Today on the show, we have Jay Vallotton. Jay Vallotton has been part of Bethel Church for over 15 years. He's been on the core team there, and he and his bride have four awesome kids, and they live in Redding, California. And if that doesn't keep him busy enough, he also leads a men's movement called Brave Co. and also all the stuff at the church. And he is somebody who mentors and he coaches and he counsels. He's an all-around busy guy, and he has a lot of great things to say. And I believe you're going to say some of those to us today. So, Jay, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Chad. It's awesome to be here with you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And, been following you for a little bit on IG, and I really love your message. And if guys, as a follow-up to this conversation, they're going to get all kinds of nuggets for sure. But also as a follow-up, go on and check out Jay's things that he has online, because we're not going to be able to cover all of the nuggets that you kind of put out there. So I know much of what we're going to talk about today, most likely they can have all sorts of follow-ups just by looking at your post or YouTube videos. And I'll put some of that in the show notes as well. So just tell us about your journey. Like what have you been up to? I just gave like a 30,000 foot view. Who are you? What's your story? And what you up to these days?
Yeah, those are big questions. I grew up in a small town in the mountains and loved it. I mean, I'm kind of a mountain man at heart, just being born and raised there. So, life started out pretty innocent for me. And, but kind of like small town kids do, I got married young. There wasn't much to do. So, I kind of feel like growing up, I feel like I didn't even know the world existed. Anything outside of like Weaverville, where I lived, and then there's Redding, the big city, 50 minutes away. Beyond that, I don't know, grew up in this really sheltered, beautiful life. And so got married really young at 18, had kids by the time I was 19.
Wow.
3 kids by the time I was 24.
What? Wow,
Yeah.
that is a lot really fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Got into ministry at 24 years old here at Bethel Church, and I was helping to oversee the school of ministry. Actually, at that time, I was just a pastor at the school of ministry, and then eventually helped to oversee the school of ministry, Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, if guys are looking it up. Basically, a Bible college type of feel, ministry school, 3-year ministry school. And so I did that for quite a few years. And in 2007/8, my wife left me and the kids, ended up going through a divorce, which is a really long story that you can ask questions, but we don't have a ton of time for that today. Ended up going through a divorce. That kind of that's like hell coming to breakfast. It's like,
wow.
My divorce felt like I woke up one day and my life was on fire. Because I didn't see it coming. I had no idea what was happening. Obviously, you have to know what's happening in order to get a divorce. But what the things that led up to that, and then my wife leaving, that just didn't see it coming at all. And ended up, spent 3 years raising the kids by myself and just hustling, scrapping, surviving. And everybody knocks surviving. Everybody knocks living living in survival mode until you have to friggin' figure it out.
Yeah.
And then you start to realize there's something beautiful to knowing how to survive. You don't want to live there forever, but sometimes we got to put our big boy pants on and do it.
Well, sometimes I think when that happens too, we kind of tap into another part of us we never thought it existed.
100%.
Because when everything's comfortable, we just kind of rock on with life, and we just kind of everything's hunky dory, to use those kind of old fashioned terms. But
yeah.
I think when we get put in a situation like yours or something where it's a quote unquote survival mode, I think that we tap into a part of us. We really see who we are, see what we're made of. Where do we go in that moment?
Yeah, I liken it a lot to my years fighting fire. I fought fire in 2000, 2001. And I always say that a man who doesn't know his limits, doesn't know what happens when you get to the end of yourself, you're always afraid. If you never have hit your limit before for let's say physical exercise, for instance, that we'd go on fires, and sometimes if you're the initial person, I ran a chainsaw for 30 hours before, just day and night and into the next day. And if you don't know that you can do that, you're scared.
Mm-hmm.
You're always trying to reserve. You're always trying to hold back. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this today, but I really feel like that's a lot of what happened to me in being married early, having kids early, fighting fires, being in ministry, going through divorce, is I found emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, my limits. And
That's a
if
gift.
something happens,
I mean, the trauma itself it seems maybe unnecessarily harsh, and I certainly don't mean that trauma is a gift in that regard. But yet, what we do with it can be a gift, because when we face that trauma, and trauma comes too by not knowing our limits.
Mhm.
I mean, many of the guys who are listening to this right now, they typically they run at red line. It's just a matter, is it 7,000 RPM or 9,000 RPM? And maybe they're so convinced that they can just, normal for them is 7,000.
Yep.
It's 7K, and they know at 9K they're going to blow up, and it's over for them. But I think that there's a lie that's perpetuated too, that I can operate at that 7K, and that the lie is that's normal.
Yeah. There's so many factors that play into that nowadays, and um, why we feel the need to go, 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 and never be able to get get out of survival mode. And
Mm-hmm.
so I spent a long time. I mean, I went through the divorce and was just fighting to get my kids out of pain, um, fighting to work myself through the pain.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a book during that time, Winning the War Within. And, you know, a year and a half later, ended up going through a nervous breakdown,
Mm-hmm.
which my nervous breakdown, actually 2 years later, ended up going through a nervous breakdown. My nervous breakdown, believe it or not, wasn't a result of my divorce. It was a result of, so I'd worked myself through the pain, got to a place where, okay, I'm powerful. Like I'm going to kick butt, dude. I'm freaking been tied up on this leash. I'm ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I get emotionally well, mentally well, spiritually well, physically well, stronger than I'd ever been working out. And I started taking on all these opportunities, right? So I started writing a book, started dating my now wife, got on, my dad asked me to be on his board for his ministry, jumped on that. I was working with sex addicts in a men's group, overseeing the school of ministry. So I had 60 students that I was over and pastoring those students, and then doing counseling appointments on the side. And then I started to help lead Moral Revolution. So I was traveling and speaking to young people, about sexuality, healthy sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And my body just went, dude, you're done. Like, you're done. And I kept pushing. I kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Oh, if I don't do this opportunity, like I'm going to miss out. And if I don't do this counseling session, this guy's hurting. And if I don't do this thing, and it wasn't like bad stuff. I mean, none of it could you stop and say, you need to put that down because that's a waste of your time.
Mm-hmm.
Or, hey, you shouldn't do that. Those are bad things. All of it was like good stuff that was just, I just kept throwing stuff on my pack until I couldn't walk anymore. And, if you've never been in a nervous breakdown before, if you never had tons of anxiety that you can't get out of, or depression, you don't know what it's like. It's easy to judge it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to be the Christian that says, I don't believe Christians should be on medication
Right.
when you've never been in that. And I spent 9 months just trying to work through it without the help of medication. And it was hell. I'd wake up, oh gosh, lots of times I'd wake up middle of the night. I'd have 3 and 4 wet dreams a night.
Mhm.
because my body was trying to cope with all the crazy emotions. And those are things that guys feel like it's embarrassing to talk about, but that's just the fact of life. I mean, that's what was happening
Mhm.
in my life, and I have anxiety all day long. Um, so, my journey out of that was some medication, and then doing the work, putting stuff down, and starting to go, okay, I got to recalibrate my life. I can't let my life run me. I've got to restructure.
There's a lot there, and even how your body was responding in such a way that your mind should have like caught those. You should have had an awareness before it actually got to the point that it did, to where you're literally having a nervous breakdown. Now, through that, I know that you've had to learn all sorts of self-awareness, and unfortunately, it's oftentimes we become keenly aware of ourselves only after we face trauma or deep loss, and
Yeah.
that's just a sad part of reality. My this podcast is called New Kind of Man, and oftentimes I even highlight stories of men like yourself who've gone through trauma or pain, or whether it was induced by someone else or induced by themselves intentionally or unintentionally, and how they've come out the other side of it and what they've changed. And for us to have a conversation like this one, where we sit down and say, okay, what did you learn from it? And are there any best practices that we can pass on to the next guy? Because I know what you and I both want. We're not sadistic people. We want to help other people to not go through the same things that we did.
Yeah.
And so how would you be able to help a guy with that bit of backstory? How would you be able to help a guy to say, to become more self-aware?
Yeah. So, I always say, like, if there was one tool I could give a guy, it would be self-awareness,
Hmm.
which to me is the ability to know what's going on inside of you whenever you need to.
Hmm.
A lot of people mix that up with introspection. It's not introspection. I'm not looking inside all day long, or looking for what's wrong with me. That's a bad way to live. If you look for what's wrong with you, you'll find it, you'll create it.
Hmm.
Um,
And then
but
manifest. You'll manifest whatever you think, then you just manifest it in your own behavior.
Yeah, but the ability to know what's happening in your unconscious or subconscious mind is a beautiful thing. And here's kind of what it looks like for me. I can describe it like this. When I wake up in the morning, I have this like plumb line or this baseline, however you want to look at it, like this.
Hmm.
Okay, this is where I'm at. I feel good, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. I'm looking at all those different categories just really fast. And I had to, at first, you're going to have to be conscious of it. So you're going to need to wake up in the morning, set an alarm. How am I doing emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually? And what you're really asking is there anything I need?
Hmm.
What do I need? Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And we can explain how to find needs in a little bit if we want to. But so what do I need? How am I? And from there, right, if I come to work and I catch myself anywhere outside of this plumb line, anywhere outside of good. So if my anxiety spikes, if I drop down to depression, anywhere in between there, those are needs that want to be met.
Hmm.
And I have to pay attention to go, okay, what happened a second ago? I walked in and I thought to myself, I'm going nowhere. This job is going nowhere.
Hmm.
Okay, that's either going to spike you into anxiety or it's going to drop you into depression. It's going to do one of those.
Hmm.
Well, there's a need. If you stop and ask, if you catch it quick enough, or it's a lie, one or the other. If you catch it quick enough, you can go, okay, I'm actually believing that I'm going nowhere. This job's pointless. I'm doing nothing. So you have no mission. You have no purpose there.
Hmm.
You're going to spend all day long wasting or building someone else's castle. All those different things that you think.
Hmm.
And if you're able to catch it really quick and figure out what the need is, you can address that, process it really fast, and then you're able to move past that. But most often what happens is that small thought, I'm not going anywhere, which is so unconscious, you don't even catch it, which leads to this life sucks, which leads to I wish I didn't grow up in a home that sucked, which leads
Hmm.
to wish I didn't have sucky parents, which leads to I hate my marriage, I'm not great at it, it's her fault. All those things, I mean, it
Yeah.
spirals into, okay, if you can start to address what the heck's going on inside of you, then you can consciously go, is this true or not?
Hmm.
If it is true, What's the need? How do I address it?
Hmm. Yeah, that reminds me of actually a conversation I had with a retired Navy SEAL I had fairly recently. Errol Dobler is his name. And Errol and I talked about these things. And in the book that he wrote, he actually talked about this idea of awareness and self awareness. And he said that we need to go from, he says, most of the time we go from trigger to emotion to action, but we never have a stop in between. It's just like boom, 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 to where it's trigger, that like whatever the thing you're talking about, Jay, it's like whatever that trigger is,
Yep.
and it's, oh, so okay, there's an emotion. I feel this way about myself. I feel shame. My life sucks. My marriage sucks. My job sucks. I'm going nowhere. I can't. And then you're starting to spiral. And then the action is, and this is probably where I would just deviate a little bit from Errol, but where the faulty way of handling it is then to act upon whatever the trigger and emotion is without actually gaining a sense of truth,
Yeah.
because it's all perpetuated by lies.
Yeah. And
Well, it
that's the
can be,
nice thing
not every
about,
situation, but it can be.
no, that's the nice thing about waking up in the morning, right? So this is what I teach people. If you can set an alarm in the morning and basically go, how am I doing?
Mhm.
Right? How am I doing? What do I need? Then before you ever get triggered, you're going, oh, I'm hungry.
Mm.
I mean, you're really hungry when you start yelling at people. You're like,
Yeah.
get out of the way, man. And or you're really frustrated when you're acting out. Well, you can catch it way before that if you're
Mhm.
self-aware enough, because you don't have to manifest something negative in order to realize, oh, this is going on in my life. It
Mm.
always starts as a small spark. So self-awareness allows you to catch that small spark before it ever grows into this forest fire where
Mhm.
everyone sees it. And so, when you're first learning, set an alarm on your phone. I mean, these are your best friends. Set an alarm on your phone for when you wake up. It should just come up and say, how are you doing? Body,
Mm.
soul, spirit. You just take 3 minutes and answer that. Okay, lunchtime, it goes on. It goes off again. It says, how's it going?
Mm.
How's it going? And you just address it really quick. You just go, I'm doing pretty well. Thoughts are great. Feeling positive. If there's something that's starting to get tweaked a little bit, you address it. Okay, into the night, before you go to bed, how did it go?
Mm.
And anything you need to clean up before you wake up in the morning. Oh, I took on this client and I knew I shouldn't take on any more clients. Okay, that's a violation.
Mhm.
So you got to address that.
Yeah, and that's interesting because then you go back to the trigger to say, why is it that I felt like I needed that one more client? There was that was the trigger part,
Yeah.
and emotion in the emotion side of it is there too. But it's like, why is it in using that as an example? Because I think it's a really good one. It's in that example. It's why did I say yes when I really needed to say no? In what part of me denied my own feelings to think that I was trying to please the person or to put my own personal needs aside to accommodate for maybe the mission or the company or whatever it is, while putting ourselves aside. I think this is what a lot of guys do, Jay. I think a lot of times they go in, and for the guys that I've worked with over the decades, this is their core problem. It's they're doing good work, like you talked about at the onset of the conversation. They're doing good work. They're working hard to maybe have a hobby, but it's really held in check, considering the amount of work that they put into work overtime to accommodate for house and cars and kids and activities and clothes and food and all of these other things, trying to love their wife well, trying to raise their kids in a way that honors God and also would bring good into the world, that they'll be just good people. And yet I think a lot of these guys, they run and they think about everybody else before they ever think about themselves. And I think this is the core issue of a lot of guys. And a lot of guys, they spiral out of control. They either go into some sort of self-harm, whether it's some sort of addictive behavior, or they just become just totally disregard their marriage and then just go maybe explore sexual exploits outside of the marriage through porn or actualizing sex outside of the marriage, or just a whole bunch of different things. But I think if we're to go back to it, many guys do this because they simply didn't know how to handle their own emotional state. And because they didn't, they started just acting out to just say, I can't deal with this anymore. But the issue wasn't someone else or even the porn. The issue was their lack of self-awareness. Do you think that that's a fair assumption or
I
assessment?
do. Yeah, I do. One of the challenges that we have, right, is if you grow up where your needs aren't met. So let me just put it as simple as that. If you grow up in a home where your needs aren't met, you're in pain. You're in pain. And if you don't know what to do with pain, then you figure that out young. You figure it out at a very young age, not 15. You figure that out at 3, 4, 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Because before you can even remember, before you were aware that you were alive, you had lots of needs, lots of them. And if your parents weren't meeting those needs in a healthy way, everything from look at me, dad, watch me jump, to I feel sad today. Stop crying. Suck it up. Toughen up. Don't be such a girl.
Blank. Yeah.
Right? Those are all emotional, mental, physical, spiritual needs that we really have, that we genuinely have. So by the time you realize you're alive, 8, 9, 10, 11, you've already figured out, I need to act out to get my need met. People aren't safe. I'm not safe. I don't trust me. People don't trust me. And that shows up in a lot of different ways. And so, someone, I can't remember who it is. It's a really famous person, said the antidote the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. And it's true. And so, when you look at, well, why are people medicating in pornography? Because they don't have true connection. Or why are people trying to please other people? Well, it's the easiest way to get out of their pain today. So when I stop and I just look at my life, and this is the challenge with being self-aware, if you don't have a process for dealing with your pain, I'm not saying theory, I'm not talking about biblical theory. If you don't have an actual process for processing through pain, when you stop and you look at you and you still don't know how to fix it, now you feel what? Even more helpless, even more powerless. You feel even more shame. And so that's a vicious cycle, isn't it? The more self-aware I am, the more I realize I got all this crap. The more I realize I have all this crap, the more powerless I feel. The more powerless I feel, the more I need to medicate. The more I medicate, the more shame I feel. The more shame I feel, the more powerless I feel. And you're just buzzing. So, it's really easy to stay in a life that is full of distraction, where I only act out once in a while. It's a prison, but if I can keep this 7,000 RPMs up, I don't have enough time to fully blow my life or feel weak and powerless. So, the question for men is, do you know what your needs are? Do you know how to get those met in a healthy way? When you encounter pain, what's your process?
Yeah, I love this. This is so helpful because I think a lot of guys, and maybe a guy who's listening to this and they've sat in the church for a long time and they've listened to great teaching, great preaching, been in some groups or whatever, and they've just started to believe in kind of like a Jesus only mentality. It's like, well, you know what? I brought all these problems to Jesus and I was just never fixed. It's like, and then unfairly and unjustly, then we put all of our own issues on Jesus. And now we just add Jesus to the long list of people or systems or processes or churches or organizations that have failed us. When the reality is, it is, okay, Jesus does offer a solution, but also there is a plan. Like there needs to be a reprioritization of your life to become more self-aware. You can't just do the same thing you've always done and then expect a different outcome, right? Isn't that the definition of insanity? That's what that is, just doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And whoever said that. But I think that so much of what you're saying just makes sense in this process. There are practices and process to help a guy to become more self-aware. What kind of practices, spiritual practices? I know you are somebody who talks about spiritual formation, spiritual practices, just as I do. So what kind of things would you say to a guy, on top of what we've already talked about, for a guy to become self-aware? And specifically, what spiritual practices could a guy implement to the plumb line is amazing. Just do that multiple times a day. In the morning before you really, before you embrace your day, midway, and then almost like an AAR, like after action reports, use military vernacular at the end of the day. Okay, how was my emotional state? Was I online today or was I off? But what could guys use on top of what you said to have like some spiritual things that they can implement in their life to help them in this process?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's growing up in the church. I feel like the church has so helped people and so failed people all in the same. And I'm just talking from my perspective. So other people can feel free to have their own perspective on how they grew up. So how we've helped people so much is by going, these are all the ways in which you can access God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. He is here to empower you. He is here to heal you. Holy Spirit is there as the comforter. How I feel like we've failed people is by making these really wild blanket statements that we don't actually really understand. They sound good. For instance, go nail it to the cross. If you're watching this and you're saved, I'm sure that you've heard that. I mean, you've heard that phrase. Or lay it at the foot of Jesus. Okay, what the hell does that mean?
It's really good, flowery spiritual language, but it needs some qualifiers, right?
Well, here's the thing. When I'm counseling, and I've counseled since I was very, very young, very young. When I'm counseling a married couple, and she comes and she says, I'm really struggling. I'm really struggling because my husband's looking at pornography. Normal scenario.
Sure.
Or he's struggling because she's looking at pornography. Whatever makes you feel good, it's fine. If I look at her or him and I say, okay, you need to take that pain and nail it to the cross. And then thank you so much for coming into my office. She goes, well, how do I do that? And I say, oh, you need to pray.
Right.
Okay. So I'll pray. No, you need to read your Bible and pray. Well, read what in my Bible? Oh, you need to read the Bible and pray and lean not on your own understanding, but lean on his. Okay. I'll try that. You know what they walk away feeling like? I must be stupid. They must be stupid. They must not be connected to God. Because I'm trying to tell them to do something that you think they haven't already tried that. You think he didn't try that or she didn't try that?
Yeah.
Or all of them haven't tried. I mean, everyone I know that's a Christian has tried that and is doing that. All those things that we're telling people, God hasn't given you a spirit of fear. Fear not. Great. Well, how? Well, what do you mean?
Don't.
Take every thought captive. You're like, okay, well, congratulations. And I know that I'm wearing this out. I know that podcast listeners are like, move on. I get your point. I don't know that you do get my point because it's been driven so hard. We have taught so much theory and haven't put practice to it. This is what you do. This is what you do. This is how it works. And so for me, I was teaching an AMT, Advanced Ministry Training class, which is like if the school ministry students who are 18 to 75 years old, if they want to grow in a certain subject like counseling or prophecy, they can take these, AMTs. And so I was doing that for our second year students. And I was talking about forgiveness. And I said, what's your process for forgiving? So they're raising their hands. And I'd call on them, and someone said, I give it to Jesus. I said, I like that. How? How do you give it to Jesus? And they said, well, I nail it to the cross. And I said, okay, tell me how. Because that's not an instruction.
That's a cliche in that instance.
They couldn't tell me. No one in that room. I said, can anyone in this room tell me how to nail something to the cross? They couldn't do it. So again, I know I'm beating a drum, beating a dead horse, whatever. But I really want people to stop and look at the cliches that you've learned your whole entire life. Do you know how to actually implement it? Because it makes, fire, cover, move, cover, fire. That's great if you know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, then you're just talking about tactics that you have no idea how to implement.
Mm-hmm.
You have no idea. Love your wife. Great. Well, that's not, that has action. So here's my thought is, you guys need to know how to find their needs, and they need to know how to work through pain.
Mm-hmm.
And when you learn how to work through pain, that has a forgiveness component in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it has the, okay, I'm going to nail this to the cross component in it. And I'll give some steps if you want. Because I feel like, well, let me just give you the steps. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as
Too.
practical as, I think, if we could get really concrete on this would be great.
I'm gonna. So to me, there's 5 steps for processing pain. And the first one is process. It's actually pick one thing, one feeling, one emotion, one need that went unmet that you're like, oh my gosh, something that violated you. Pick one thing. Because a lot of guys get overwhelmed. Everybody gets overwhelmed when we say, I freaking hate my dad because he did all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Take one thing and begin to focus on that thing. Step 2, begin to write about it. Or type, somehow, or talk about it, or write a song about it. Somehow you have to mold that thing over. You got to get into it, embody it, and don't try and get out of it. When you avoid pain, time doesn't heal. Time is a revealer. Otherwise, people in prisons would be the most whole people. They just have the most time.
Yeah.
But time is a revealer. So the process with time heals. So we want to sit in that moment. And so like through my divorce, I would remember one moment, like maybe my wedding day. When you're in a divorce, everything that was really happy flips to really sad. So my wedding day, I can remember the day that I remembered her walking down the aisle. I was crushed. And so I ran up into my office. I was at work. I'm having this memory of our wedding day. I'm in the middle of my divorce. I run upstairs. I'm bawling. I turned my lights off in my office. I put on really sad music, not happy music, because I'm not happy. I put on sad music and I begin to write. I begin to type. I'm not writing, oh, I'm so thankful for you. I'm saying
that'd be betraying what you feel like in that moment.
In that moment, I'm going, this is how I feel. It's not a commentary on your character. So when you're typing something out like that or writing something out like that, it's not a commentary on your character. It's commentary on how you feel. So for a lot of the time, if someone doesn't read your journal and question your Christianity, you're not being honest.
Wow.
So I'm sitting there
I hadn't
writing,
thought about that. Man.
And I'm going, how dare you? How could you? I'm blaming you. I'm getting it out. I'm getting it out, which maybe I'm on step 3 now. Like I'm processing it. At some point, I've cried. I'm angry. I'm processing. In between typing, I'm crying so hard I can't type. Then I get back to typing and I'm crying. I'm painting this beautiful picture while listening to sad music on repeat. I get to a point where I'm exhausted. An hour in, I'm exhausted. It feels a little bit like you're naked because you've cried so much and you've processed so much. There's almost nothing left. I've said so much. There's almost nothing left to say because you can only say it so many times if you're staying on one thing. And I finally got to the point where I'm like, I heard myself say, what are you going to do about this piece right here? And I'll tell you what this piece is. Now that's when I was at first talking to her. Then I switched to talking to God. Because once you get out of all the judgment, all the crap, F you, screw you, how dare you, all the judgment, you come to this place where you realize what's driving that pain. What was driving that pain wasn't the fact that she wasn't with me. What was driving that specific pain and that specific memory was, who's going to want me? I gave my vows away. One time, I saved myself for you. I gave you something I can't ever get back. I can never give to another person. I didn't realize how specific it was. And I didn't realize how angry I was
Hmm.
that I felt betrayed in that. It was very specific.
Hmm.
So that was the piece that I needed to bring to God.
Hmm.
Not this whole thing of, not all my judge, this one piece. What are you going to do? The only guy that can do anything about this piece right here. What are you going to do about my innocence that I gave away that I cannot get back? My vows that I gave away that I can't get back. What do I do about that? I feel so angry. Obviously, look at what I wrote towards her. I feel so angry, so powerless in that. That is the moment where God went, boom, let me tell you what I'm going to do.
Hmm.
Holy crap. I'm sitting there. I'm typing. I'm sitting here. I'm actually asking, what are you going to do about that? And he goes, here's what I'm going to do about that. He gives me a promise.
Hmm.
Dude, when he gave me that promise, I can, honest to God, I could breathe.
Hmm.
I could breathe. I was like, okay. Now, from that place where I actually met with God, however guys work it out for themselves, where I met with God and he met that need that I have, all of a sudden I was able to go, okay, I'm on like step 4. I know I'm not giving guys great steps right here, but just stick with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm processing the pain. I'm hearing what God, I find the need. That's step 4, find the need.
Mm-hmm.
What's actually driving this?
Mm-hmm.
And then step 5, you're going to give that to God.
Mm-hmm.
So step 4, what's the need? Give that to God. Step 5, how do you see the person that hurt me? Could be yourself, could be somebody else. Most often it's somebody else. Because here's the thing, once God met that need for me, I no longer had judgment towards her for that one instance.
That's a great perspective, because there's a lot of times that people say, oh, I've forgiven that person, or I've forgiven myself. I mean, I think ultimately a pathway of forgiveness, and we probably can't go in too much into the weeds in this. I think that ultimately we walk through, because of the trauma that we face in our life, and those of us who are in Christ, I think that we go through, and there's times where we need to forgive God, we need to forgive ourselves, and we also need to forgive others. Because if something happened to us and God knew it, I'm not saying that he says, hey, I want to make sure that I want to do that. That's not God. God is not like that. He's not fickle, and he's not wrathful upon his children. However, he does allow certain things to happen in our lives to be used as character defining things for us. And we see that in the scriptures of that's how God ultimately works with a lot of people. You know, you could use the example of Jacob, and Jacob was, he had the birthright and blessing in this Old Testament. You guys can look this up in Genesis 36. He had the birthright and blessing, but he didn't know what to do with it until God wrestled with him. And not Jacob wrestling with God, until God wrestled with Jacob.
Right.
And then after that, Jacob walked away changed.
Yeah.
It was this transition from false self to true self. The Apostle Paul had the same thing when he was had scales in his eyes and he was blind, and he says, I was blind, now I can see. It's the same dynamic, Old Testament, New Testament, and it's a similar thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, when you get to a point where you are able to go, this is really what I need, and God meets you in that moment, the judgment that you once held towards the other person, you're holding it for a reason. You're holding them ransom for a reason, because you're trying to get your need met. Well, once God meets that need, then where I go from there is, Holy Spirit, how do you see the person that hurt me? Right? Because I want to have compassion. Compassion kills judgment, but it also goes the other way around. Judgment kills compassion. So what I did is I said, God, Holy Spirit, or how do you see her? He showed me. Boom. It was almost instant. Boom. Again, my needs already met. From that place, me seeing her, how God sees her, that's where I go back. All the things that I said, F you, I hate you, how dare you, I forgive you for that. And I'm turning over every stone. I'm turning over all those stones. Boom, 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 boom. Well, I just did that thousands of times. Not the same one, but the memories.
Yeah, that's really incredible advice. I hope the guys are tracking with that, because that's how you know if you've really forgiven them. a lot of times guys go through and they say, "Oh, I've forgiven them," but yet if they're still harboring resentment, hostility, bitterness. I mean, I could take you to the Bible. It says that bitterness, the root of bitterness, leads to anger, rage, malice, slander, and then here's
Right.
like a catch-all phrase: and every evil thing.
Evil thing.
Yeah, and then the follow-up verse, that's actually Ephesians 4:31, 4:32. Be kind and compassionate, forgiving just as God's forgiven you. So there's an interesting thing by asking that question, that how do you see that person now? Ultimately, is kind of like the spiritual X-ray, if you will, to say, have I really forgiven them, or is this just my way of coping with the pain? Because forgiveness is not just a way of coping with the pain. It's after the pain has been coped with and healed, then we can forgive.
Exactly. And, I always say this, like, sure, maybe the first level of forgiveness is choice, where like,
Mhm.
I'm choosing to. That's
Yeah.
great. That's awesome. Your heart posture is great, but forgiveness is not a blanket. And
Mm.
we've been taught that forgiveness is a blanket, again, in the church, not outwardly, but, come forward, somebody gets saved, come forward and you pray
Mhm.
the sinner's prayer. I forgive everyone who's ever wronged me.
Mhm.
Jesus, would you forgive me? And we take this blanket, right? And we throw it over the believer who's now the believer.
Mm.
And then they go home. And a week later, they go, well, wait, I still feel the same way I felt about my dad molesting me. I still feel the same way.
Mm.
But I have to forgive him because Jesus forgave me.
Mhm.
And that little boy or that little girl inside of them is saying, well, how do I reconcile that? Because
Mhm.
that took something from me.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Well, I
that's
forgive that guy who molested me or that guy who raped me, or I forgive myself for,
mm.
whatever, sleeping with somebody, taking advantage of somebody.
Mhm.
And we don't ever teach anybody we rarely teach people how to sit down, process it, find what the need is, literally give that to God in a conversation. God gives you the answer for that. Then
Mhm.
you find compassion. Then you genuinely release them.
Mm.
Okay, that one is gone.
Mhm.
Eat well, sleep well, exercise, have fun, fill yourself up, process again later on
Mm.
next week.
Yeah, this is really helpful, and it does take time. So while it seems the instructions are simple, they're pretty straightforward, but yet the process is not easy, right? Because at the end of the day, you're saying one thing. So I mean, in someone's life, we face all sorts of trauma. I've whether it's a divorce or stuff that happened, like father issues. I mean, just about every guy. Well, I don't want to necessarily put words or thoughts in people's heads, but most of the guys that I've had interactions with, there's some sort of father wound, and I'm talking even dads who were trying hard, who were doing the very best. The reality is, we were raised by men and not by Jesus. So there, there's trauma there. So it's handling that one thing. And I think that your advice is solid because it addresses the one thing at a time. And now you can use the same principle. Okay, there's maybe another layer of trauma. You don't have to just whitewash it and just throw a blanket over it like you're talking about and ignore it, because that doesn't work. That simply doesn't
No,
work.
it doesn't. And here's the thing, there's a lot of stuff that the Lord did go back and just heal.
Mm.
There's a lot, and who's to say that somebody doesn't get saved? I've seen it happen. And at the altar, they really do. God comes in and does something that he didn't do for me in certain areas. That's fine. He's
Yeah.
also not afraid of the process. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I don't want to discredit somebody who had a Saul to Paul encounter
Mm-hmm.
and, all those different examples that we see. But we also shouldn't be afraid of the process, because life's a process, and we are going from cliche glory to glory,
Mm-hmm.
and we are renewing our mind, and we are changing the way that we think. And part of that is when you get really uh, I'll say this: when you start to go through a process where you're looking at one thing at a time,
Mm-hmm.
did I absolutely go through my whole entire marriage and process everything? No. At some point, at some point, I think at some point, my body went, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Like these big things, your innocence, your word,
Mm-hmm.
um, the betrayal, am I good enough? The big things that I actually really cared about, I feel like, yeah. So there's probably 100 of those. Probably
Mm-hmm.
wasn't thousands. There's probably 100 of those big things, but you spread 100 out by it took me about 7 months
Mm.
of processing to work through 12 years of relationship.
Right. And that's even with God sparing you of the 1,000 things, just using obviously
Yeah.
just kind of like absurd numbers. But if it's 100 things you work through in 7 years or excuse
7
me,
months.
7 months of those years of marriage, that's one thing. And I think God spares us. I believe that. Not that I just think God spares us
Yeah.
to go through and process every little dink and donk thing that's ever happened to
You
us.
don't.
And sometimes God's just like exactly like you're saying, Jay. It's like, hey, you know what? You're not, that's good. That's God's grace to us, all right? It's just saying, yeah, there's some big things. You're going to work through these big things, but you know what? All those little things, I'm going to spare you. Those are going to be just kind of washed away in this moment. And now let's look at this other big thing. Because if not,
Yeah.
we would always be in a place of want. And we would
Yeah.
always be in a place of brokenness and ultimately in not living the abundant life like Jesus talks about.
Yeah, it's true. You just work it out. You get to a point where you're like, okay, yeah, I'm good. All the core identity things, all the major things that you're wondering about or that you need. So, I think for guys, the biggest challenge that I see with people is we get a half an hour in on a 10-year journey or a 100-mile journey.
Mm-hmm.
You get a mile in on a 100-mile hike and you realize, this is work. I don't want to do the
Yep.
work.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many years I've taught this stuff and how many guys will actually stop, get out their phone, pause this podcast, get out their phone and go, how am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
What do I need? How's it
Mm-hmm.
going? How did it go? Breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And start to live that way every day, right? And then maybe on your mirror, you write a couple things in Sharpie on your mirror or erase or dry erase.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the major things that I need to remember. Not just God is my rock. That's great. But here's the things that I need to remember. And you start to put those things up there on your mirror so that you become, think about how long it took you to create the culture you live in today.
Yeah.
It's going to take you some time to recreate, to change the way that you think, right? To truly repent, to change the way you think, your body, soul, and spirit, and to begin to walk out of that, to renew your mind. Everyone loves that verse, to renew your mind. Well, that's freaking hard. It's breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Yeah.
That's that kind of work we're talking about. And to catch yourself when you get off a little bit, not when you get off a lot, to catch yourself when you get off a little bit, and to reward when you stay on track and you're going, okay, yeah, I'm on track. Yes. All right. No, this thought right here doesn't line up with the heart of God. Okay. Out goes the thought. Oh, that thought came back after I tried to kick it out. Maybe I need to find out how somebody else thinks about it. So I gained somebody else's wisdom and perspective on it. Then, right, I realized, no, it's not just God that I need. It's people that I need too. Because you realize when I use them in this context, when I don't make them my God, but I use them in this context, I get stronger and I get quicker and I get more efficient. When I learn how to add experts to my life, I get more efficient. I get their momentum. I don't have to start from zero momentum. So all these people that are like, Jesus is all I need. I'm like, you have no momentum. You have very little momentum. And you're only going to be good at you're only going to be as good as you could possibly be. You won't be as good as anyone else could possibly. It's a very one-sided, fear-based, selfish way to live. And I don't blame them for that. It's their experience. But we isolate ourselves, and then you wonder why you crave connection so much and why you battle pornography and why you battle. It's the connection that you're craving. It's somebody actually truly knowing you deeply. It's the experience of being able to fail in front of somebody, knowing that you're fully loved when they accept you, not when they BS you, but when they accept your failure. It's the intimacy, authenticity is probably the most courageous, selfless thing that you can give to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that too. And I love how Brene Brown talks about that. She talks about that at length in her work about connection, empathy, and presence, and engaging other people, and just being authentic, being your authentic self. And being your authentic self is really, I guess, a way that I would define being your authentic self is really the same way that I define integrity. oftentimes integrity just kind of gets lumped in some sort of mantra and definition for leadership. But I think the integrity to me is this, and this out of the books that I've read, maybe I borrowed this, so I don't want to take uh, credit unnecessarily, but it's being honest on the outside about what's going on the inside.
Yeah.
And what we've been talking about is being able to be aware of what's going on the inside and to make that transition. So really for the last hour or so, we've really stopped and just allowed guys to grasp, hey, here's how you can know what's going on the inside. And it's as practical as 3 times a day, set an alarm. Hey, how am I doing right now? What's my baseline? You know, am I being triggered in one way or the other? Am I responding in the way that I should? Do I have people in my life, as we were just hinting at, or you were rather, just do I have people in my life who are helping me live in alignment with my beliefs and the behaviors that are going to be best for me?
Yeah.
And a lot of guys, I think that they, you know, we maybe have a hunting buddy, or we have a fishing buddy, or we have somebody who helps us work on a car, or maybe we talk to that guy over a cup of coffee or whatever, or we go sit, you know, and have a donut at church or something. But few men actually have a true band of brothers like what Stephen Mansfield would talk about, where there's a couple guys who you invite into your space with a free fire zone, is what he calls it. It's using his terminology, to just allow us to say, man, you know what? I want to affirm that part of you. And also, I want you to know that this is something that I see, that this is a problem. You know, and that's really the kind of stuff that you're talking about too, Jay, is just being able to kind of step outside of ourselves and invite somebody else in. So we don't have to live with zero momentum. We can continually live with this perpetual momentum and going in the direction that we want to go.
Yeah, it's true. I think a lot of guys mistake transparency for vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they're ripping themselves off, you know, being able to stand up in a whole group of people and show where you're at, but not being able to take feedback. It's just transparency. I mean, it's window shopping. You can look at everything, but you can't touch it and you can't have it.
Mm-hmm.
But true vulnerability, authenticity with vulnerability partnered to it, says it becomes this covenant thing, right? You have permission to change my mind.
Mm-hmm.
You have permission to touch me. And that's what we're trying to do with God when we show him our pain. And so we're trying to do it. I mean, just we're trying to get to the place where we use our courage. Like if we're going to use Brene Brown's language, we use our courage to show, to be authentic and to be vulnerable so that we can get the strength that somebody else has to lend to us. And it's the hardest thing in the world to do. I mean, there's nothing ever easy about it, but you never learn that you're truly lovable, and you never will love yourself to the highest standard if you are afraid to show people you. And so it's always a very clear gauge of what you think about yourself and what you think about other people. You know, how willing you are open to be. And that's something that we're all striving for. We're all on this boat together. And I'm with all these guys going, you know, I'm working through my pain, and I'm working through, you know, different seasons in life are tough. And we're all in this boat together, really working hard to grow and to find motivation, to be disciplined in that growth, and to renew our mind, and to be authentic, and to be authentic about when we weren't being authentic.
Yeah.
It's a journey, you know, no one's got this thing pegged, but we're all on it together. And I just think that, you know, in this day and age, men are starving for that. They're starving for something that really works, for something that is worth putting effort into, and with people that are worth putting effort into as well. And so, you know, if you're on that journey, I commend you. And you can just know that there's hundreds of men around the country that are doing the same thing, we're waking up in the morning, we're being diligent with taking care of ourselves, because, you know, anytime your inflow doesn't match your outflow, you're going bankrupt. You know, you have to put more in than you're putting out, or you're bankrupt. Finances, you're bankrupt. You put more out than what you're putting in, bankrupt. And so, you know, I just, there's lots of easy ways to think about it. And there's lots of ways to sit down mathematically and go, how much am I putting out this week? Body, soul, spirit. How much did I put out? Okay. How much did I put in? You can do that calories. You can do that emotionally. and how you fill up emotionally. So if guys are like, okay, what do I need? Well, how you recharge emotionally is through fun.
Hmm.
Through fun. uh Fun for people is different than others. So guys, they look at porn. We'll stay on the pornography thing.
Mm-hmm.
They look at porn, they go confess to whatever, their wife or their friends, which is great, themselves, and then they get in this emotional outpouring of depression, and then they don't have the actual stamina to walk out of
Mm.
the process. I worked with sex addicts for years, and I just see over and over again, the more sad that they are, the more they think that other people think that they're repentant. And a person who
Mm.
is just depressed and sad all the time, he doesn't have the energy that it takes to, okay, I'm gonna process today, then I'm gonna go and I'm gonna crush it. I'm gonna jump on a jet ski and have stupid fun. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
get on my dirt bike and hit some jumps. I'm gonna go hunting. I'm gonna whatever you're fun at. I'm gonna go read a book. I'm going to mentally disconnect from this thing, recharge, and then come back and hit this again.
Mm-hmm.
If you can learn how to live a balanced life, then you can really work through some stuff and grow and expand your capacity. And so, I want to challenge guys, if you're in a really hard time emotionally, don't process, go have fun first.
That's really, really good advice, because especially for guys like me, I can be so into my head and perfectionistic, and I'm a strong Enneagram 1. If you're familiar with the Enneagram language, I know you are. You've made reference to it in the past. It's like I'm so much into that, and and guys like me can get so intellectual, so into our head, so into the self-help space, to think that it's necessarily something that we just need to do and dig a little deeper and all that. And what you're saying is so liberating. It's like, no, detach for a little while. Detach from that mental game, from that gridlock. Detach, go have some fun, disengage a little bit, and then come back stronger. I think that's not advice a lot of guys hear. I think
No,
most of the
because
time it's like, go and get more work.
be a man, push,
Yeah.
days off are for.
Yeah. Fill in the blank, right?
And Muhammad Ali had a great quote. He said, it's not the mountain that breaks down the man, it's the pebble in his shoe.
Mm.
If you've ever hiked or ran, you know what he's talking about.
Yep.
And what is a pebble in your shoe? I'll tell you what they are. They're needs.
Mm.
When you're looking at a hypothetical mountain, whether it's processing emotion,
Mm-hmm.
getting married, raising kids, starting a business, going to work every day, those are all things that you're climbing. You're pushing hard, you're climbing. You don't get broken down because the climb's so hard. You get broken down because you don't take care of your needs along the way.
Mm.
And pretty soon you can't walk. It's that rock that you don't stop to take out because you're in such a freaking hurry. You think you're such a man. Now I'm hiking with pain. Now I'm mad. Oh, I'm not slowing down for anybody. Great. You may take this mountain, but you're not going to take the next one because it's so freaking traumatizing. You won't ever approach a mountain again. You stay at the bottom, dabble at the bottom. And, so when I hear that, I'm like, this is so true. If we're going to change the way that we are, we got to meet the needs along the way. I mean, you got to, when you're planning, and this is what I want guys to do. I mean, when you're looking at your life, what are the mountains that you have to take? And are you prepared to take that? Do you actually know the right path, the right route? If we're talking metaphorically, men are going into the Arctic or to the Alaskan wilderness without any knowledge, because the manly thing to do, and they're just throwing themselves into there and thinking they're men, but they're just dying one after another and, coming out medicating. It's just like, man, there's nothing manly about taking something on that you're not prepared to take.
Yeah.
Stop.
And I think that's a really good message too, because guys, we constantly get that mindset push, and I'm an advocate for a strong mindset, but in all the grit, determination, Angela Duckworth's book on grit, it's like we get all these mantras and things that are telling us to go and be and pursue and pioneer and trailblaze. And oftentimes, of course, there's a time and season for that, but also there's a time to just kind of recover in between mountains.
And prep.
Yes.
Prep really good, because it doesn't have to suck.
Right.
So when you're learning, okay, what are my needs? And when you're learning, how do I work through pain? And when you're learning all those things is prep. And the more you prep before you hit the mountains, before you get married, the more prep you do pre-marriage, the funner marriage is.
Absolutely.
And the more prep you do even working through pain, the more prep you do ahead of time and going, okay, I'm going to work on my emotions when, like I'm going to work through my dad issues once I'm recharged emotionally. So I'm going to go jet ski. I'm going to go climb that hill. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. Then I'm going to come and I'm going to focus I'm going to give one day to working through this one piece on my dad. Great. And then after that, I'm going to go hit the mountain again. You'd be so surprised how fast you climb that mountain. Most people never get off the first lift because they start so down. One, they don't know the road. They don't even know how to process. But even if they do, they start so emotionally drowned because they're so desperate to get out of it that all they're trying to do is get out of it too quick. And James chapter 1 says this: consider it pure joy or hilarious laughter when you encounter various trials. For the testing of your faith, I'm paraphrasing, produces perseverance or endurance. And when perseverance runs its course, you will lack nothing. Okay, so I'm just going to say it again. Consider it pure joy or hilarious laughter when you encounter various trials. For the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And when perseverance runs its course, you will lack nothing. When we run away from a challenge, when we just try to get through, when we just try to get rid of it, we miss out on endurance. And when you can come to a place where you can endure, the Bible says you won't lack anything. Not to a place where, I just love it because to me, I love it because if you know the endurance game, if you know long distance running, if you know endurance, you understand endurance takes tons of prep, tons. If you've done a marathon or ultra marathon or anything like that, enduro racing, anything where you're doing endurance, you know that recovery is as important as the actual enduring. And Jesus's look on his medicine for endurance is joy, not hypothetical joy. He's going like, no, this is going to be great. This road's going to be awesome. Consider it joy. It's Philippians 4 says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your kindness and gentleness be evident to all. The Lord's near. And it goes on to say, if you need anything, if you're in a hard place, let your request be known to God. And then it goes on to say, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. Your peace won't guard your heart and your mind, not the peace that you can conjure up. You can't meditate it up. You can't freaking zen it up. It's God's peace. His peace will guard your heart and your mind. What's your job? Rejoice. When? Always. That's why he said it twice. Rejoice, be kind, check yourself, and you don't have to find peace. God will do it for you. So when I take all this stuff together, to me, it's just a math equation. You're in a hard time, find joy. Don't try and get out of it, find joy. Recover really quickly. Don't try and run out of the trial. Just pause. Get recovered, get charged up, take care of those needs because you're about to go on a hike. When you go on a hike, what's going to happen? You're going to be working on your endurance. When you work on your endurance, you are coming to a place where you will never be broken. In fact, not only will you never be broken, you'll come to a place where you don't lack anything because you have the endurance to get through it. And when you hit another hard trial, be joyful because you know it's the beginning of a beautiful thing again. Rest, eat well, sleep well, exercise, have fun, push. Don't push until you've eaten well, sleeping well, exercise, have fun. That's the way God's created us. Anything else and you're trying to earn something that you can't earn. Prove something that you don't need to prove. Work harder than you need to work. You know, you're not getting extra tokens in heaven for crushing yourself down here.
Yeah, you're just getting misery. Ultimately, that's really helpful too, because again, I think that's a storyline of a lot of guys. And if were to go out, and I think you really added some meat to the idea of what we think joy is, because a lot of times I think people think of joy, either think, wow, that's a really big theological term that I'll never really acquire, or
Yep.
they think of happiness instead of they replace the meaning of happiness with joy. And of
Right.
course, happiness is fleeting. It's in the moment. We love happiness. I love happiness, uh, but yet joy is the longer lasting thing. One of the things that I found with this, and I'll just allow you to speak into this, Jay, is one of the things that I found when it comes to the topic of joy, people need some other concrete things to go with that as well. So consider it pure joy when you're enduring these trials. And there's a couple different things that I think add into this, being able to understand while we sit in this place that you mentioned,
Yep.
understand and grasp joy. And I think it's the idea of gratitude and thankfulness.
Yep.
And so I say it in this way, and speak into this if you are in agreement or not. But uh, gratitude is the attitude, and thankfulness is the expression.
Yeah.
So for us to be joyful people, we have to have an attitude of gratitude, saying, okay, God, thank you for this day. I may not like everything this day's here, but I thank you for this day. I thank you for, and then just look around. And it could be something as simple as going outside on a walk and saying, wow, thank you for the birds. Thank you for trees. Thank you for beauty. Thank you for a hobby. Thank you for a car. Thank you for a house. Thank you for a family. Thank you for a wife, whatever the case may be. Just gratitude is just the attitude. And then thankfulness is the vocalizing. Okay, thank you for this.
Hmm.
And then naming those things that you're thankful for. All of a sudden, what I found in my own life, it takes me out of the circumstance. So I don't feel like I'm bearing the weight of the world in that moment. Instead, I pull away. I'm not totally disengaged. I'm not emotionally disengaged. So I'm not useful, but I pull away just enough to where I start to have a better perspective and more of like a God's perspective than a poor, pitiful me. Now I'm just have to just endure this trial for endurance sake.
Yeah,
What
it's
what would
true.
you add
So
to that?
yeah, Philippians, if you continue on Philippians 4, it says, finally, brothers, whatever's lovely, pure, noble. I mean, it just lists all these things, right?
Mhm.
I would say he's not even spiritual things. So
Mm.
it would be those things of like, man, I'm so thankful for this. And I'm so thankful. If I wake up in the morning and I have some anxiety before I even get out of bed, the first thing I go to is thankfulness.
Mm.
I mean, for real, it's not cheesy thankfulness. Like I get into the place where I'm starting to think through what's real in my life, what
Mhm.
has really happened. Because usually I'm in something that might happen. What's real? What has
Yeah.
really happened? What can I tangibly feel that, oh, okay, now from that place of thankfulness, what's God doing in my life?
Mm.
Oh, you're gonna learn endurance. If you get around somebody that has learned endurance before on a real level, it's freaking awesome.
Mhm.
When you get with a real runner, you're like, this is what I have to endure in order to become you. Yeah, sweet. A weightlifter, you're like, this is what we do. So this pain that I'm feeling right now, this leads to this. Yeah. Oh, I'm happy. You don't leave the gym when you're sore and be like, what the heck?
Yeah.
You're sore when you leave the gym. You're like, yes,
I did
you
something today.
know where it's going. The
Mhm.
same thing in our life. If you're carrying a lot of responsibility and you're like, I'm sore from carrying this responsibility. You're not like, oh no. We should be like, oh, he's expanding. He's expanding my territory. That's why I'm
Mm.
climbing mountains. Okay, you
Mm.
can stay down here forever, or you can climb this mountain. So consider it pure joy or hilarious laughter when you encounter various trials. It's like when Jesus was led into the wilderness, right? By the devil to be tempted.
Mhm.
He ultimately out persevered the enemy. He outlasted him.
Mhm.
Came to the place where it says that the enemy left him until a more opportune time. Well, there was no more opportune time. I mean, he
Mhm.
literally outlasted the enemy. And that's what the Lord's trying to get us to. He's trying to get us to a place where we know how to take care of our needs. We know how to process our emotions. We're not carrying extra baggage up the hill. Again, to keep on that metaphor, I'm not
Mhm.
hiking up the hill with all my bitterness, my anger, and then wondering why I'm getting tired. No, I offloaded that at the bottom
Mhm.
and I'm recovering. And when I'm hiking up these crazy hills, I'm just taking me. And when it gets hard, I'm being present. I'm being thankful. I'm being caring. I'm being vulnerable so I can get some people's help too. Am I still on the right path? You know, I think that there's a lot in what we're talking about, but if guys will just take it, pause it, listen to it again, break it down, build a map, build an action plan for yourself, and find out what's missing in your tool supply, what's missing, where are you going awry, and then readjust yourself. You know, you'll find that you get on the back on the track, and you know, you really you can cover some ground well.
And that's really the life that all of us are after. I mean, that's what we're longing for. We don't know how to get it. We don't know how to possess it. Even what I talked about, you know, quoting John 10:10 earlier about how Jesus' offer is abundant life, or life to the full. We really don't even have a category to put all of the things that are entailed in that one simple and yet incredibly profound verse. But part of this is this running with endurance. It's a life without lack. It's a life without lack and without believing that we lack something. So that when we face trials, that we could do so with joy. And all of these things are the outflow of our walk with God, in not just some ethereal kind of out there, you know, even just as a metaphor. It's like it can be embedded in our reality.
It's true. And it starts with doing it today. You know, guys are like, where do I start? Just do today. Do today really well. And I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said, never leave something tomorrow that you can accomplish today. You know, I just think, like, do today really well. Use your calendar, live inside of your calendar. You know, if it's not in your calendar, you don't really value it. Put it in your calendar, put your money where in the areas that you need to grow. Find the best help that you possibly can, but do it today. Break it down to today. And then tomorrow, do today again. And the next day, do today again. And you'll get somewhere. You'll get somewhere.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, this has been a great conversation, and we've covered a lot of ground. It's been incredibly helpful to me, and I know all of our listeners are just, you know, they're going to have to go back through and listen to this again and to get these notes, which, you know, I think that's some good advice. I'm going to listen to this again and just kind of take notes for my own self and my own inventory of all the stuff that you've said. So just any closing things that you'd like to say, and also if you could kind of tell guys what you're up to, where you can be connected socially, and the other work you're doing in case they want to follow up with you.
Yeah, for sure. My last words are, you know, go get some. Do it. You can find me at braveco.men. On Instagram and on Facebook. So we're building the men's movement as well. And so ours is discipleship based, and we're going to launch a platform here in April into May. So
Awesome.
Online subscription based platform to help guys grow. And so there'll be more information on that coming soon, but you can follow us on braveco.men, or you can find me Jay Vallotton on Instagram as well. So thanks so much for having me. Come on. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I have too. It's been my pleasure. And again, thank you so much for just distilling your wisdom, telling your story, being honest. So much value has come from it just simply because your honesty and your journey in and through your divorce, and how you're on the other side of it. And now you and I are very similar. I haven't been divorced, but you and I are very similar. That we've gone through our own pain and trauma to now we're wanting to cycle back and help guys to not go through what we've gone through, and to say, hey, here's a couple best practices. If you put these into practice, you can live a life that's more full and live with less regret.
Yeah, it's true.
So again, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It's been my pleasure.
You're welcome, man.